Hey, Strong Girls. I'm Molly Herford, sports journalist, ultra runner, cyclist, and author, and founder of Strong Girl Publishing.
And I'm Dr. Sasha Golish, Executive Director of Yellow Running Shoes, a researcher, engineer, elite runner, and your BFF who's breaking down the science of smashing barriers in women's sports.
Think of us as the intersection of science and culture for women and girls in sport. Each week, we'll dissect the latest headlines and cutting-edge research on female athletes.
Debunk myths about girls in sport. Talk about how hormones affect performance at every age, to the latest research in sports science around mental performance, nutrition, equipment, and so much more.
And we'll spotlight badass girls and women who are rewriting the rules of the game, sometimes literally.
Expect it to be nerdy.
And occasionally TMI.
But it will always be honest.
Whether you're a strong girl yourself or you're raising one, this show is for you. Welcome to Strong Girl Talk,
where sports science meets sisterhood.
Hello, hello. Welcome back to Strong Girl Talk. I'm Molly Herford here with my dear, dear friend, Dr. Sasha Golish. Sasha, how's it going tomorrow?
Tomorrow's great. I've got my coffee from Coffee Room. I went down to the beach already. I'm in Australia still. Just people are like, what? It's the time zone happening. Yeah, things are great here. It's been so fun to see, this culture, how people move around differently. Yeah, I get why people live here, although everything's still trying to kill you. I get why people do want to live here. Molly, you've got something on the calendar this weekend. You want to talk about it or no?
I could totally talk about it. I've got a lot of things on the calendar, starting with, Saturday.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Like, oh, geez. Saturday, I am racing my first 100-miler since my disastrous Leadville attempt last year. So send good vibes towards Sulphur Springs. If you're listening to this before then, hopefully it goes smoothly. I'm feeling good. Taper's feeling good. And then, of course, in my downtime as I recover from that effort, Shred Girls, Lindsay and the Curse of Gemini Lakes comes out on Tuesday, and then we actually have the launch party at Mansfield Outdoor Center on Saturday. If anyone is around and wants to come hang out, we're doing a thing also with Heddas and For All Mothers where we're doing a walk. Sasha's going to be there talking with moms. It's going to be just such a fun, amazing day. Normally we start this with our sport highlights. And actually, Shred Girls really got me thinking because Isabella Holmgren just took her first pro UCI win at a stage race in Basque Country. Amazing, so exciting. I mean, she's been world champion in cyclocross. She's, amazing mountain biker. She's been racing on the road with Lidl track. This is so huge for her. And when I saw that come up, all I could think was, we featured her back when I first started the Shred Girl series back in 2016. In 2017, I started doing Shred Girls in real life, where I was profiling different little girls who were, like little girls, young teens who were just crushing it on the bike. And Bella was one of them. Her sister Ava was one of them. And as I started thinking through the list and going through the list, I mean, oh my gosh, we have multiple Olympians on there. We have world champions on there. Even looking back, I was looking at, I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember this one, young teenager emailing me being like, hey, I'm just starting my bike racing career. And I looked at the name and I was like, Ferrand Prévost, that sounds familiar. So it was PFP's younger sister, Axel, who is now racing the Lifetime Grand Prix series. Molly Simpson from Canada, who went to the Olympics for BMX, just all of these amazing young girls who are still in cycling, which is actually, like, to me, the most important part of it is that they're still in there. But, like, just so, like, honestly, it makes me choked up just thinking about, getting to know all of those young girls and seeing where they are and, realizing Shred Girls has been around for, going on 9 years. And, when I've been at talks been at races and stuff, I had girls come up and say like, oh, I read these books when I was a little kid. And, I feel triggered because that makes me feel very old. But it also is just, I'm like, oh my God, I started this thing that actually is like helping girls find bikes and stay in bikes and love bikes. And I'm just so excited about finally getting book 4 out. So yeah, yay.
So what you're saying is next year I'm throwing you a 10-year anniversary of Shred Girls and an epic party.
Okay. I love it. I love
it. I know my roles in life, science and parties. I'm in.
Not really normally things that I put together, but that works for you. That totally works for you.
I mean, it's organization. I'm just putting together a like spreadsheet of like organized ideas and bringing great people together. It's just like working in a lab.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Um, yeah. So, all right, cycling, amazing stuff going on. Nove Mesto Mountain Bike World Cup comes back next weekend. It
Yeah.
is like busy, busy, busy. Um,
No, no, this weekend.
this weekend, right? So
This
I
week.
will be missing
Yeah.
it because I'll be racing, but maybe someone can like yell out to me what's happening as I come through. Just give me a quick
I'll
little.
text Peter. Yeah. Hey, Peter, can you just like, can you update her?
Yeah, yeah. That'll be the important thing we're working on. Not like, am I eating enough or, am I hydrated or do I have any blisters? Just like, who's winning the World Cup?
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, 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 results. Give me results.
Exactly. Yeah. Continuing in the women's sports, what's going on? WNBA season officially underway. I've been seeing stats about just like the amount of fans watching now. The viewership numbers are just, I mean, they're wild. They're bananas. It's so exciting. Um, and it's leading to it's leading to some moments. You want to talk about the no space for hate situation?
Well, I don't think it's, I mean, let's talk about the positive of it first, right? They want to be a leader in this space, right? This league wide initiative to better protect players, preserve the spirit of the game, and affirm the values of the league. I should have looked up the values of the league, but let's take it as like an ethics of sport, right? Where, everybody holds themselves to the highest standard. We treat everybody with kindness and respect. Like, I think that probably is a great way, not just to sum up what should what this thing is doing in the NBA, this no space for hate, this initiative. I mean, I think I'd love to see this across sport. Basketball can be catty, right? I mean, this opening weekend, Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, the rumors about the quotation marks drama between them. I didn't watch the games. Not an easy thing to do from Australia, timing and both access, but. I have watched the like interaction between the two of them, and I'd say that what did I say before we started recording? It was like it was a yucky foul, right? It was poor behavior on Caitlin Clark's part, and the ref. It's not just a moment in time. The league is looking into it and really trying to change the game. I think I'd love to see is this like no space for hate is. I don't know if you saw the conversation around salaries, Molly. So Paige's starting salary versus the males, and just that no space for hate, like why women are still being paid less, and just like there's no space for hate in there. Like let's have a good conversation about it, whether it's fair, unfair. Like we're not passing judgment here. I would like to see them pay more passing judgment. But this idea that like we need to act with kindness in person over social media in media instead of this like clickbait let's cause some drama and harm to get eyeballs on things. Like, I think we can change this. And I think
Hmm.
the WNBA wants to be leaders, and that's what they're doing.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, really, that better like to protect players. And, this is
Yeah.
something that we are seeing different leagues kind of try to start becoming a little bit better at, a little bit more accountable for, whether it's, I forget which league it was, but one of them like actually just apologized for their handling of like an emergency medical situation where they kept playing.
NSWL.
That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah. And
Yeah.
they apologized. They're learning.
Yeah.
So I think,
Yeah.
yeah, we're now in a phase, especially with women's sports, where money is coming in and, the games are changing, right? Like there's a
Yeah.
lot more to kind of contend with. Now you actually have a ton of fans, a ton of eyeballs, and how does that change things? Um, more money kind of needs to be more protection, more, more for the players, not just, oh, good, now the, owners can actually make more money. Um,
Well, oh my gosh, where was I just going to go with this? What I was sort of thinking is, like, I wonder if, so down here in Australia, now I remember my brain is going, apologies, not enough coffee yet on this day. So my stepdaughter's working in social media, and there's this like division between like fandom where like older than us generation really watches like consumes it like TV. So even if they're consuming it on like a mobile device or a computer or whatever, and not traditional TV, they're often consuming like the whole game in front of them on a screen, probably dedicated to that screen. And then our generation and younger, and our generation kind of goes between like we're the analog digital generation, but the younger generations are these tiny little sound bites. And so I think those sound bites, what we need to be doing is we have the older generation hypercritical of a whole bunch of things. Well, it's not the same as that used to be. It's like, okay, fine. Like we've heard that so many times now. Like, great, next. And the younger generation is only seeing bits of it. And so then how do we have this conversation around we need to have both of these? How do we get the younger generation to watch more into it, to see more of the nuance? And how do we get the older generation to just not be so crotchety?
Hmm.
Right? And sort of change that ethics around it. There was a World Athletics study done during the Budapest World Championships in 2023. And I think what I want to highlight here is that this isn't just directed at female athletes, that male athletes it was almost a 50-50 target. And so we're not just talking about women's sport and when there's no space for hate, like it should be sport wide. And so it's cool that the WNBA is leading this. And I hope it just like abstracts up and becomes like an all sport kind of thing.
Hmm. Absolutely, yeah. Other interesting thing with WNBA, from the gist, people should definitely follow them, follow their newsletter. It's fantastic information. I love their business of sport one personally. And what I thought was super interesting is they were talking about the WNBA and talking about the fact that players are actually more popular than any of the teams. So there's a lot of the players, Caitlin Clark, obviously, who has a lot more followers, like by hundreds of thousands, than her actual team. So,
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean for the WNBA? Not really good, not really bad, just kind of this new, interesting, weird dynamic that the teams are going to kind of have to contend with. And like, what does fandom look like now? Do you root for teams? Do you root for people? And I think as the WNBA like finds its footing, more and more, that's going to become even more of a question. Maybe we just need more teams. Like maybe as we get more teams, then people will start having their team. We're maybe just like a few years out from that point because now it is still just very like individual stars. I would personally actually, I think almost rather see the teams because, it's cycling. Like I'm going to come back to cycling. That's what I know. You have the Matthew Vanderpools, you have the Wout Van Aerts, you have the PFPs, you have the stars. And then, and especially in women's cycling, you have the severely underpaid supporting cast. And if the WNBA continues the same trajectory, you end up with these stars of basketball that are paid huge amounts, but you don't necessarily raise the lowest salaries necessarily. The base ones stay the same. But if the team is huge, then I think you see all of the salaries come up. So that's my 2 cents on why I really want to see that happening.
All here for it. Like just pom poms everywhere. Like, so well discussed and nuanced, Molly. Thank you for that. Wrap up with a little track and then just get right into this.
Let's do it.
Track like the thick of track. So like all of me misses track and field so much. The smell of the rubber, the like lights at night, like I just miss it. Um, Lots of Diamond League. We had Doha last weekend. We're in Rabat this weekend. The one thing I just want to highlight quickly is already we've seen Grand Slam track change their calendar. So they've gone from a 3-day meet to a 2-day meet. The distance people have been cut down to one event. There's this overall prize pool. How does this affect them? Anyways, I think it's interesting. On the one hand, I love that they're listening, but on the second hand, like, did they not really listen to make track? I worry, and I look at all the great things and the mass participation events and all the road things that are going on. And I don't want track to be lost. I think there's so much power, especially when we think about it like the playground to podium pathway, right? Like track is an accessible sport, right? Go run 100, go run a 50, right? Try some hurdles, go jump in some sand, jump over some things. Like I don't want to lose track. And so, I hope that it does more good than harm to my lovely sport.
I completely agree. Again, I come back to cycling. Cycling tried the NCL, like the National Cycling League,
Oh yeah.
remember they tried it a couple years ago and
Yeah.
like they didn't even get through a full season before they were, canceling things and like, rolling back on like most of the promises that they'd made. Um, I don't think this is that level. And I guess like to me, I actually kind of applaud the pivoting to hopefully make it viable and sustainable and fingers crossed that that's how it happens. Yes, I wish they had done that from the get-go, but we can't have it all. So fingers crossed it does not go the way of NCL because I hate to see initiatives like this start out with so much hype and so much excitement, um, and then not totally go the way they were planned. So we'll be watching is really what we'll say there. Um,
So let's go back just a second before we get into the Juliet conversation. You know what I didn't mention with all no space for hate? We're trying to create psychologically safe spaces, right? Like
oh,
this is our job in sport, right? No space for hate is creating probably psychologically and physically safe spaces. Like let's just be very real. There are instances of physical unsafety. But this week we're talking with Juliet. I'm going to pass it back to you in a second. But the following week we're talking about psychological safety, which is like one of my favorite topics of all time, and I think yours too. So yeah.
it has become one of my favorite topics of all time. It's always I just laugh so much at how you and I seem to be thinking with one brain sometimes. As you said, you texted me about psychological safety the day I had just turned in an article that I had not told you about psychological safety. So I think yeah, clearly that is a topic that we are going to have to get into what it is, what the misconceptions are. So definitely make sure that you are subscribed and tuned in to next week. But this week we have a treat. I mean, when I say that Sasha and I fangirled hard on this one, we fangirled hard on this one. We have the legendary Juliet Starrett, co-author of Built to Move, along with a couple other books with her husband, who you might know, Kelly Starrett. He's medium deal, I guess. Also a huge deal. She's a, women's sports and health advocate, youth sport advocate, generally just an amazing, badass, wonderful human being. And this conversation, I really didn't know where we were going to go with it, to be totally honest. And could you believe how good this was?
Oh my gosh. I'm like excited to listen to us.
I know. Yeah, I feel like we got her at like the perfect timing because
Yeah.
she talks about youth sport, but hasn't gotten I don't think she's talked as much about youth sport as we did in this conversation. It came out they're working on a book about it. And
Yeah.
I feel like we got a lot of like the kind of almost early preview of what's going into that. And I am so jazzed. And I also love that she talked about, we didn't just talk about youth sport, we also talked about it from the perspective of being a mom and how that changes, what you're able to do as an athlete. Not for the bad, just that it's different, which is something that we're excited to be able to do with the For All Mothers Shred Girls hangout next weekend as well. So all perfectly timed, really. Almost like we planned it. All right, without further ado, let's get into this conversation with Juliet Starrett. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to rate, review, subscribe. We appreciate you so much, and we hope you love this conversation as much as we did. I am so excited about this. This is like the best little grouping of women here. Okay, so I'm just gonna get right into it
Let's
here.
do it. Let's do it.
All right. Strong girl talk. Sasha and I are beyond excited to bring, you know, really the ultimate fangirl Friday moment for us here. We have Juliet Starrett in the house. Juliet, welcome to Strong Girl Talk.
I am so excited to be here, you guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Um, you do so many things. So really, I think we need to just kind of start with like the baseline. How do you, what's sort of your elevator pitch bio as far as like what you tell people you do when someone asks these days?
You know, this is hard because we've been trying to figure this out for like 20 years, and it's a struggle. And I think it's partly because we do a lot of different things. But I would say at this point, I am the leader of our company, The Ready State, where we teach people about movement and mechanics and mobility, encourage people to move more. I am a best-selling author, podcast host, a mom. Maybe I should put that one first. And I do all this in partnership with my awesome husband, Kelly.
I love it. And I love that you had mom at the back of that and then also would flip it because I think like what I love is when women have all of these identities and they all matter so much. Um,
True fact.
so actually being a mom though is kind of where we wanted to start with this because you have been a really high level athlete for a very long time. You've had different phases of your athletic career. But I think being a mom who is also an athlete who has this high performance background is really challenging for a lot of reasons for you and then also for raising young women. So, I mean, talk to us about how your athletic journey and motherhood, where they kind of overlapped, where they didn't, kind of what you learned, through that.
Yeah, I mean, my athletic journey, I think, it's just a through line through my whole life. I mean, I really was a dabbler of an athlete in sort of elementary school, middle school, wasn't really actually a very good athlete. I was always like, the borderline B team person on like the softball team and the soccer team and stuff. And then when I was in high school, though, I found the sport of rowing. And I mentioned to you guys in the pre-roll, but I was just at my Cal Women's Rowing 50th anniversary celebration. And one of the people said, who got up and spoke about rowing, she goes, nobody plays rowing. Rowing is just like a sufferfest. And a lot of people who join rowing or become rowers are people like me who are sort of like slightly mediocre athletes at other things, but for whatever reason have like a weird something's off in the brain, and so they like rowing because it's true, it's very technical and complicated, but like arguably not that fun. But I think what makes it fun is the teamwork and the camaraderie and all the things that team sports bring to people. But I was a Division I athlete at UC Berkeley, and then went on to be a professional whitewater paddler, and did that both as a sort of regular 20-year-old professional athlete and then again as a master's athlete. And then in the middle of all that, I competed in the CrossFit Games. I got into outrigger paddling for a while, paddled the Molokai, and our shared love now, in my mid 40s, I fell in love with mountain biking, and I'm not good at it. I'm a very passable mountain biker, but I just love being out there. I love that I can get on my bike and I have like location privilege. I live in Marin County, so I can get on my bike and get on trails and, be out in like deep nature pretty quickly. So that's just fuel for my soul and good exercise. And I do it with friends. So that's like a little bit about that. But I did know, because this athletic experience was so influential to me, and I do think set me up to have certain successes professionally, especially from a leadership perspective. And I was sort of aware of that connection. So it was like pretty clear. And then Kelly is, very athletic, very sporty, 2 national teams himself. So I think it almost like wasn't a discussion for us that we would encourage our kids into athletics. And our point of view, sort of this is sort of how we parented generally, which was like, it's not a free for all over here. There are going to be boundaries, but they're going to be real wide. And within those boundaries, you can decide what you want to do. And when it came to moving your body, we were like, the choice to move, there's no choice to move in this household, in the Starrett house. Like, you can't choose to be a couch potato. But how you want to move your body is your choice. And we're going to support that. And so our kids did everything. They did ballet, gymnastics, martial arts. They did that thing where you like hang from the ribbons dangling from the ceiling. I don't know why I can't think of the name of that. They were on swim team. They played volleyball. They just like, if they expressed an interest, we're all in, we'll support it. Because my point of view is there's some kind of movement for everyone. And it was my job. I really saw it as my job as a parent to expose my kids to all the ways there are to move, because I knew they would find something. And I really believe if you find a way to move in your life, you're going to keep doing it. The people that I know now and work with now in their 40s and 50s who struggle to incorporate exercise into their life often are people who didn't figure out at a young age how they like to move their body, and figure out that moving their body makes them feel better, even if the motivation to start is hard. So we pretty much knew, we were like, this movement thing is going to be a thing. It's a kind of a non-negotiable in our family, but we really we're like, whatever it is you want to do, like if it's dance, whatever, like we weren't going to try to push kids into team sports. And then the other thing I'll say, which I've said a few times on my social media, is there's this weird thing in parents where kids get striated into either being athletes or creatives. And then the creatives all think, including their parents, that like they don't need to move and that they don't have a body. And that's a real, like, I've been trying to kind of point that out to people for a while because I'm all for, like, I have a kid who's super creative. Like, she is crocheting and sewing and drawing and painting, and she's just like a deep creative. Like, that's what she likes to do. She's sort of like a hybrid introvert extrovert. And, but it doesn't matter if you play the drums as a teenager, like, you still have a body, unfortunately, that needs to move. So I've been trying to kind of bang the drum out there and say, hey, like everybody needs to move, and it's a parent's responsibility to help your kid figure out how they're going to move for life. Like that's one of your jobs.
Oh, I
My
love it.
gosh.
The drumming just reminded me of the first time I ever really thought about that was because I was the creative, non-athletic kid. It was literally
Yep.
I was at a basement show and the drummer of this band, Matt and Kim, which is actually now like a really big band.
Yeah, I know Matt and Kim.
Oh my
Yeah,
God. So watching them in a basement when I was like 19.
that's so
Kim,
cool.
it was the funnest, best show ever. Honestly, like if people haven't listened to them, listen to them. She's like, just she's an amazing drummer, and I was like watching her, and then for some reason, somehow later on her social media on Twitter or something, she mentioned that she was a runner. So that was how she was like able to be so enthusiastic on the drums. Because if you've watched her play, like she is like that is a
Right.
high
That's so
cardio
athletic. Yeah,
activity.
drumming is so athletic. Yeah, the guy who I don't know why I can't think of his name right now, but the lead singer of Death Cab for Cutie, that band, he's like a major athlete. Like he like runs marathons and stuff. And so it is this thing where you're like, okay, you don't have to be like and the other thing I will say is, as you guys know, we've been running a physical therapy clinic. Kelly's a physical therapist for years, and we've seen so many musicians because we live in Marin, and there's a lot of, Marin is like, if you're like a 70s, 80s, famous musician, you now live in Marin. But we see tons of musicians because it's hard on your body to be a musician. And so, holding a guitar in a weird way, people get neck things and drumming. I mean, so it's hard on your body. So even more reason why you've got to figure out how to move your body and take care of your body.
Yes. And Sasha, as Juliet was talking about the creativity, all I could think of was you and I talking a couple months ago when you said your course is your canvas. And I want you to just like drop that in here and explain that conversation you had, because I think that's so relevant to what we're talking about.
Oh, thanks. So there's so many things here, but I think about running, which I haven't been able to do lately, but I went out for a walk this morning. It was actually the first time I got to like explore again. So it was this idea of like in itself is art. And so my background is engineering, right? And so in engineering, which is I would argue a creative, because there's many creatives there, they don't see themselves as athletes. But actually to be the best engineering student, to be the best creative, like you need to move your body. And so, helping engineering students like think about movement in a different way. And so it was like, okay, for me, it was also about doing math equations while moving. But now it's more about like, how do I explore, right? Like, how do I actually be creative while moving? And I think all of a sudden, instead of siloing things, we start to connect things, right? And it's like, well, this is how this helps this other thing. And like a lot of the work that we do in the lab where I work at the University of Toronto now connects those pieces of like physical activity and sport to better mental health. And you just did such a great job of like connecting it. And we're really trying to break down that like, okay, there's traditional sport and yeah, you can do that, but just get your kids to move their body in a way that like works for them. And so how do you create a canvas for them? How do you come at it with like curiosity and wonder? And so I don't know, can we unpack a bit like how you did that with your kids so they develop their sense of wonder and curiosity with movement?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a parent who's paying attention and you start plopping your kids in sports, it becomes obvious pretty early on, like which kids are team sports kids and which kids are not. I mean, all you need to do is put your kid in like, a couple little soccer leagues when they're like 5 or 6 or 7. And you can learn, you can just see. I mean, you can see if you're paying attention, you can see which kids are like yes to team sports and other kids who are like no to team sports. And so I think that would be like the first point of identification is like plop your kid in some team sports and see if that's for them. And if that's a no-go, there are a billion individual sports that kids can do. I mean, all the way from like my friend's kid is a fencer, martial arts. There are martial arts. There's dance, which I guess maybe in some ways is a team sport. I mean, again, there's 1,000 things you can do that are individual sports, even swimming, I would say, which is like a team sport, but with an individual element. So I think that would be like the first order of business with little kids is be like, do you see your kid as someone who gravitates towards team sports or doesn't? And then if they don't, which is, I mean, my guess is it's like 50% of kids don't really gravitate towards team sports. It really is like exposing them to all these other things. And by the way, we forget about all the sports we like to do. I mean, let's include mountain biking and skiing and also like exposing kids to sports that aren't about being competitive. Like let me just take skiing, for example, which I will give the preface that Kelly and I, every time we go skiing, we're like, this is the dumbest sport. Like the amount of money and time and resources and expenses and like carving out these mountains and like cars and rich people. And like, I mean, skiing's kind of bonkers, right? Like when you really step away from it, you're like, it's for like the 1%ers, right? Skiing is sort of.
Well, and then add in, you put on a plastic boot that freezes.
Yeah, I mean, right. Like Kelly and I have these like meta conversations sometimes, but at the same time, we both grew up skiing and we love skiing. And we taught our kids to ski because it's like, well, that's what you do. We ski, but it's like one of the few sports you can do as a family where all four people are doing the same sport. I mean, there's really almost no other sports that you can do, maybe golf or something. I don't know. There's not that many family sports, but I think that's the other thing is there's so many other ways to move your body that aren't a sport at all. Like, is your kid into walking or hiking or rucking or mountain biking or cross country skiing or skiing? I mean, I think the sky is really the limit. I think as with younger kids though, like my calculus would be like, is my kid a team sport kind of kid? And if so, you can nurture that. And if you see your kid's not a team sport kind of kid, then like nurture the thousands of other ways. I mean, whitewater kayaking, I mean, you name it, rock climbing. There's so much out there. Where a kid who doesn't want to deal with the oftentimes crazy dynamics that are team sports can still find a way to love to move their body.
I love that. And what I'm also kind of hearing here is that it's okay for your kids to quit things that don't feel good for them.
Yes. Yeah. And like our rule in our household was, look, there's money involved here and an investment. So our thing was like, you can't, like, if we pay and you commit to doing a thing, you're doing that thing till it ends. If that's a 6-week or 8-week season or whatever, like, okay, sometimes you need to commit to doing a thing. And maybe you might not like it. But then when the season ends, we can sit down and have a real honest conversation because we also didn't want to create this thing where they don't value that, like as parents, we are actually making a monetary investment in this. And we ourselves are making a time investment in, driving them there and getting them there. So it's not, it's a family investment. So if we're going to make an investment in a thing, we need them to at least, give it a solid try. And usually these youth seasons aren't that long. They're like a couple months or 3 months tops kind of thing. But we basically are like, hey, look, you need to see it out to the end. And then we can sit down and have a conversation. If you're not into it, great. Let's move on to the next thing. And I'll give you an example. My daughter Caroline is a junior and she's a water polo goalie and she loves water polo. And she started off in swim team. And at like 6 or 7, she's like, Mom, swim team is so boring. And I'm like, you're right. Swimming is boring. Like I could never be like, I was like, what do you even think about all that time? You're just in the water. Like it's a lot. Yeah, just, but whatever. I mean, great. People like swimming. And so I said, okay, well, why don't you try water polo? Like we have this, kind of water polo culture around here. But she was 8. And, I don't know if you guys know about water polo, but it's really hard. And you have to like, tread water the entire time. Like you never put your foot down. And so I drop her off and I say, because I think it's like when they're 8, I think it was like an 8-week session, 2 or 3 days a week. And I just said to her, I said, hey, water polo is really hard. Like, you're probably not going to like it the first few times. And it's going to be really hard. Like it's going to be very taxing on your body. So I just want to prep you up for that. It's going to be hard. And I think that really helped because she went into it with the right expectation. And by some, like, I don't know how this coach who I have such like mad respect for this guy teaches 8-year-olds how to like water polo. She fell in love with it. But if I had just said, okay, you can go once or twice, but if you don't like it, you can quit. Like, dude, she would have been like, I just had to tread water back and forth, treading, like I just had to egg beat her back and forth across the pool 25 times. I'm 8. Like what 8-year-old would like that? So again, I think it's striking this balance between you do have to push your kids a little bit sometimes. You have to make them appreciate that you're making an investment in a thing. And at the same time, like, dude, dabble. Like kids need to dabble.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, really gets to a lot of your points with Built to Move, with, everything that you've done is this, lots more movement beyond even just the one sport. So
Yeah.
I think that's one of the big things that, we wanted to talk about, especially with you, is this idea of moving sort of throughout the day and not just having that like one little chunk of movement, because I think and Sasha can definitely speak to some of this as like where we are in like the research and everything with it. But like most kids, even the active ones, right? Like get up, they sit and eat breakfast, they sit on the school bus, they sit in school, they maybe have recess, but like when the weather's crappy, they're indoors for recess, so they're sitting inside. Then they have their hour of activity after school. Then they get picked up. Then they go home. Then they're sitting at their desk or on the couch. So really, we've even active, kids that we would call active kids just sat 23 hours of the day.
Right. Right. I mean, it's bonkers, isn't it, you guys? I mean, when you really think about that. And, we've had quite a few interesting people on our podcast, including this guy I totally recommend everybody follow named Jeremy Frisch. He's a coach on the East Coast and, he coaches a lot of young kids. And he's really trying to say, hey, we got to bring back free play, except for it's not going to be like, let's not live in some fantasy land that we're all going to just let our kids outside like the 70s or 80s. Like that ship sailed. We're not doing that. No one's doing that anymore. But he really is this huge advocate of, you know, in a sort of controlled environment, bringing kids into his gym and teaching them the skills they would have learned if they were free playing. So, jumping, landing, rolling, hopping, hanging, throwing, all the things that like little kids, that we did maybe naturally because we were like locked outside in the 70s. But they aren't doing naturally. And so I think that's also so important. I mean, we put our kids in gymnastics for that reason when they were little. I mean, it was plainly obvious that they were not going to be gymnasts just based on like what we look like. Like there's like, okay, this is not there's no future for them in gymnastics. But we were like, hey, how can we get them some of these fundamental movement skills? So I would highly recommend that to anybody. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty serious. I think, unfortunately, parents have to start to think about making sure their kids are moving in other ways. And I can't remember if I talked about this before, but when my kids were in elementary school, I started a walking school bus where we would meet kids. Kelly and I did it by ourselves. We just said, hey, at 7:55 every single morning, we'll be at this corner. And if you want to drop your kid off to walk the, maybe 3/4 of a mile to school with us, like, we'd some days have 5 kids and some days have 40 kids. And sometimes the parents wouldn't join us and sometimes they wouldn't. But it was like, it had this amazing twofold benefit. Like our kids would walk to school like a half mile or 3/4 of a mile every day. We actually were able to enter the school through this back way, which was like this beautiful field with like flowers and stuff. We could avoid the dreaded drop-off lane, which I have so many things to say about the drop-off lane being horrible. And then they'd gotten a little bit of movement in, so they were probably like ready to go and learn, right? They'd kind of gotten a little bit of movement in their bodies. So yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately, because there's so much on parents' plates, but unfortunately, just putting your kid in an hour of an organized sports in the afternoon is not enough movement. You've got to get them walking and biking and encouraging them to, move in other ways besides just organized sports. It's not enough, unfortunately, because I know parents are strapped.
Oh my God. Well, but then that's a great point, right? Like, what's a better way to get some of your own movement in than walking your kid to school?
Yeah.
So I sometimes used to walk my nephew to school. And there would be nobody around. And
No.
I was always like, did you want your kid to do really well on that math test that they have at 9 o'clock in the morning?
Right.
The best thing that you can do is take them to the playground. And I don't know what it's like where you are, but one of our big challenges here that we're up against in Canada and particularly in Ontario is playgrounds are locked.
Yes. That drives me insane. Yeah, there was a thing at our school when my kids were in elementary school where they weren't allowed to go use the playgrounds before school, I guess, because they didn't have a staff person there to supervise kids. And I'm like, okay, dude, like, how did we survive the 70s? Because, we were sliding down a slide that was like 100 feet in the air and it was like burnt and your legs would burn in the sun. And there was definitely no one supervising us. And, so I mean, yeah, I think this, and, it makes me a little sad because I don't know what is at the root of that. Has there been litigation? Some kid went to school and got injured, and then somebody sued, and then it, like screwed it up for all of us or whatever. But yeah, I mean, like, God, that is a simple thing schools could do or parents could do to advocate in their own schools is say, hey, we used to all get to school a half an hour early. Like we walked to school, by the way, but then we would plan it out because we were like, I'm planning to meet my friends at the playground, at 7:45, and we would like make sure we got out of school in the morning to go have our playground time. So playgrounds should be open, and if I had my druthers, honestly, if I ran a school, I would fence over the drop-off lane. Because, the data shows that, I mean, I don't know what it's like in Canada, but here it's something like 75 or 80% of kids live within 2 miles of their elementary school. So I get it. There's still 25% of kids who don't and do need to drive or ride the bus or whatever. But we've like when my kids were in elementary school, we had this parents raised all this money for the school, and we ended up having to spend like $40,000 of it to upgrade the drop-off lane because it was so congested and impacted. And I'm like, you guys, if you saw where I live in like Pleasantville. It's like literally safe and easy for pretty much every kid to walk or bike to school. But because we've set up this environment where everybody just drives to school and that's what you do. And, everybody's upset and sad and, like stop, dropping, and rolling out of their car in the morning. Like it's this, like literally the drop off lane is like the saddest place. So yeah, I mean, if I had my druthers, like if I was a principal, I would close the drop off lane. I would figure out ways to encourage kids to bike or walk to school. If I couldn't do that, I definitely would open the playgrounds so that kids could get to school early and play for 20 minutes or half an hour before school starts. Like to me, that's just so obvious. So obvious.
For sure. And we've seen actually here in town, we've seen that parents, when angry enough, can really change policies because in 2022, they tried to shut down the playgrounds because of like a COVID outbreak. When I say the parents rebelled, I mean they were tearing down fencing. It was probably the most engaged civically that the parents in this town have ever been in their entire lives. And it worked because the town reversed the policy like 2 days later. They're like, we're sorry, please don't be mad at us anymore. You guys are terrifying.
Yeah. And I do think there's a lot that needs to be done in that. Like, let me give you another example of something that has worked and is starting to work. So I can't remember if it was 2 years ago, but California passed a law that I believe it's middle and high schools can't start before 8:30 a.m. And that's based on a gigantic body of research showing that it is unhealthy for teenagers in particular to start school before 8:30. Like the 0 period should be a thing of the past in high school. Like teenagers need to sleep and they are naturally, their circadian rhythm switches. They naturally go to sleep later. What we had Wendy Truxell on our podcast and she is a sleep expert. And she said, waking up a teenager at 6 a.m. is the same as waking yourself up at 4 a.m. So those times when you have to make a flight and you wake up at 4 a.m. and you basically feel horrible for the rest of your day and like you get to your destination and you still feel horrible. Like that's how teenagers feel every day being woken up at 6 a.m. So that was a policy change done by a group of parents who amassed this gigantic body of research and started advocating for later school times. And it became a California statewide policy. And now it's Texas, I believe, passed it as well. And I think North Carolina, and it's starting to happen. But it's like when I have any platform where I have an access to parents, I'm like, if you live in any state, not those, like the work's been done. Like the research has been compiled, the work has been done. There's no question that later school start times are healthier for kids. And like, this is one area where parents really can go and start saying, hey, it is not okay for school to start at 7:45. And by the way, it's gone on long enough in these states where we've learned that it doesn't ruin after school sports, because that some of the people will say, oh, okay, well, if we start later, then we go later and it's going to ruin after school sports. Well, it doesn't. The evidence has borne out that it works well. So, I mean, that's something parents can definitely do. Like today, like if you live in a state where your kid is starting school at 7:45 and they're in middle or high school, like, go do some research online. There's tons of resources, and like that's a place where people can make real policy change.
Just for all the Canadian and Ontario parents, you don't have to go anywhere. I have it all. Just send me a note. I've got it for you. I've got it all. It's a lot what we do in the lab. So, like, I have a vulnerable user hat on here, but just one of the other things that you bring up that's so important in Ontario, and particularly as spring sports start, a lot of our sports actually start in like our morning sports. So kids are quite literally, they're waking up even earlier. And so I was thinking about it actually, it's Youth Mental Health Day as we're recording today. And I was just sort of thinking about it, going like, and we wonder why they're grouchy. We wake them up when they're not ready to be awake, and then we make them wake up even earlier so they can get to the school sport that they care about. And then we do, X, Y, Z, and we make them sit still, and then they can't move, and like that it impacts their mental health as well. And it's just like, okay, we have overwhelming evidence of like how we can make it better. Like it's time we actually just took our own advice.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's no more research needs to be done. Like we know kids aren't moving enough. They don't eat, they eat a lot of highly processed foods and not enough nutritious foods. And I'm not, by the way, someone who's like, I'm not anti any food. Like I think there's a time and a place for an ultra processed food. So I'm not a restrictor in any way, shape, or form. But in addition to Doritos, we need to be eating fruits and vegetables and getting healthy protein in our body, right? And making space for kids to sleep, and giving time for them to move during the school day. I mean, one of the things our elementary school did that drove me absolutely insane, and maybe it's different in Canada because we're soft here, but when we had rainy days, the kids were kept inside during recess. This drove me absolutely insane. I was like, guys, it's a wives' tale that kids get sick when they get wet. Like they can get a little bit wet. Just have them bring some rain boots to school and put on their raincoat. And like if their pants are a little wet, like they're not going to get sick. They're fine. So I don't know if is that a thing in Canada, or do kids just put on their snowsuits and go right out and play? Like, is that a thing?
It depends. So one of what we're actually up against is less so about the kids being wet, is that caretaker staff, is that the teachers and the caretakers don't want to deal with a wet floor, right? Like you can't like just bring in a towel and like, right? Like, oh, it's and maybe it's like a policy like the floor gets slippery. It's like, okay, well, engineer, could you please not
Right. Solvable problem. Right.
you not make a polished concrete floor for the students to then have to walk down the hallway? Like this is easy.
Right. Very solvable problem. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, we've got I think we exactly what you said. We've got the research, we've got the knowledge. There are so many little levers we can pull that would make a huge difference in youth mental health. And the other thing about sports is, something like 70% of youth drop out of sports by age 13. So there's a lot of work to be done there because, I don't know if you guys read The Anxious Generation, but Jonathan Haidt's, theory, he basically says the two ways to solve this anxious generation crisis is sports and religion. And so if the sports thing is true, how do we keep more kids in sports? And I think part of it is this dabbling phenomenon. I think a lot of kids, their parents are like, you're going to play soccer. This is what you're doing. This is what I did. So you're going to do this. And then they sort of push their kid into a thing. So I do think parents need to be intuitive and figure out what kind of thing their kids like and help them find the thing that they like. I think that's the number one way to help keep kids in sports or movement practices. But it's a thing. It's there. We have work to do there because no matter what, technology is not going away. And so unfortunately, free play is going to continue to be limited. So sports, we do need to keep kids in sports if we want to keep kids moving. And, we have to figure out how to help less of them drop out.
And I love that you said sport or movement practices. Just again, double clicking on that, like it doesn't have to be a competitive thing or a structured thing. And I think that's so important to keep kind of like,
yeah, there's so many ways to move your body. So many ways. I mean, let's get more kids on mountain bikes, right?
Totally. Last week, Tommy Lundberg and Joe Baker. So Joe Baker wrote The Tyranny of Talent, but they wrote this paper about like we have to stop thinking about this like singular pathway, right? Like you will play soccer, right? To your point about dabbling. And so like they did it in a Swedish example and those 8 recommendations. I posted it actually on Instagram last week and Instagram was like, your reel is too long. Nobody's going to listen to you. And I was like, oh, this is just so that I can vent and like share this like awesome work. Joe, again, going back to Joe Baker's book on talent, I'm blanking on who wrote the other book. Oh my God, David Epstein's book,
Yeah, yeah,
Range.
yeah. The Talent Code.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Range, right?
Range. Great book. I love that book.
Me too. And I think,
So good.
like it's drawing all these things together, but I also like that moral code of religion, right? Like um bowling for the the community aspect. I'm blanking on this research now. Sorry, Molly, I sound like a little bit of an idiot. But
You
this
do
idea
you
of
know.
like but how do we bring, instead of siloing like sport, physical activity, recreation, and religion, like how do we bring them together, right? And like think about like the great moral code of like religion and then like the physical activity part of sport. I just yeah.
Yeah, I mean, let me give you one example. Like down here, we have this great tradition of CYO sports, right? They're like connected to the Catholic churches, and they have all sorts of different sports, but they're competitive, but like non-competitive, right? They're not that serious. They're not travel. They always remain local, and they're starting to decline because so many kids and families are pushing their kids into like serious club and travel sports. And so these local like fun leagues are starting to decline. And we need more of that. Like we had our friend JP who owned a couple CrossFit gyms and now works for Orange Theory. Wherever he grew up, somewhere on the East Coast in his high school had these teams that they called thirds. And basically in all these sports, they had these teams like let's say a volleyball third. So they'd have like an A team and a B team, and then they'd have a third. And it was understood if you played on the third that you had like no desire to like win. You weren't competitive. You stayed local. But they created a space for kids to be on teams and just be able to play sports just for the fun of playing sports. Like volleyball's fun. Like even if you're not like could care less about like winning at volleyball, and I suck at volleyball, but like I love like playing volleyball's fun, you know? And so I think a lot of these even team sports for kids who don't relate to or like team sports, if you really take out the competitive piece and you're just like, hey, let's figure out how to play volleyball. And at the most, we're going to play a couple other local high schools and we're not really playing competitively. We're just playing for fun. If we create more of those kind of opportunities for kids, like that's a huge thing. So we need to keep those leagues, those like random local leagues. We need to create, non-competitive teams in high school so kids can just play for fun.
Yeah. And I mean, I think coming back to we're talking about religion and sport, the thing that really binds those two things or like brings those two things together is the community aspect of it, right? Like that's where the team sports really thrive. If the community aspect is like first and foremost versus the competitive side of it. And it's funny, I was just talking, I do a lot of writing for True Sport, which is like USADA's youth sport arm. And yesterday I was just having a conversation with someone where we were talking about, can the coaches start talking with the athletes about values, like personal values, team values, and actually create more of a team culture that is actually like value centered, not just we're going to win states this year centered.
Right. Yeah, well, we're writing our next book it's a parenting book about youth sports,
I'm so
called
excited.
Outplay. And I agree with you. I mean, the community piece that's why I personally love team sports, and I am, I like team and individual sports. And even like my own mountain biking, I feel like is a community sport because we all just get together and just yuck it up the whole time. And if we can't talk while we're biking, like we failed in our route planning. And so yeah, I mean, the community piece is so important. But one of the things we're trying to do in our book is create space for families to be a little more intentional about their youth sport and movement journey, because one of the things you see is that I get it because I'm in it. It's easy, and I like to use a river analogy because I'm a river person, but it's easy as a parent to put your life jacket on and jump into the current, and then you're just floating in the current. And it's hard to swim out of the current once you're in it. And that's what youth sports can often be like. And so we're trying to tell people, like, take a minute before you jump in and actually sit down with your family and with your kid and ask them and ask yourself, like, what is it we're trying to get out of this? Because you can often have these disconnects where you have a parent who's like, why are you, like, what is it you want? And you have a kid who says, I just want to hang out with my friends and have fun. And then the parent is like of the mind that this kid's going to college and they're completely not aligned because they've never talked about it. Or the flip side can happen. I have a friend whose daughter at 6, like, it is already obvious that she will be a serious competitive athlete. Like, she gets off the soccer field and is like mad that her teammates aren't trying hard enough and aren't competitive enough. And it's innate in this kid. She's 6, right? And so her parents need to say, okay, I have a kid who actually really does care about winning. This is a kid who cares about winning. So how can I meet that kid where she is? And if I have a kid who just wants to be in this for fun, how do I meet this kid where they are? Because I think it's so easy. It's easy to just be like, youth coaches fix everything, right? But what we have to remember about youth coaches is they all make like $2 an hour.
If that, most schools,
some of them are volunteers,
volunteer teachers. Yeah.
And so parents need to take some of this intention back in and take a hold of that. And then if you have a kid who just wants to be in sports for fun, then you need to nurture that. And that's the kind of parent you need to be. If you have a kid who just wants to be hanging out with their friends and whatever, then like make sure when you get in the car, you're not talking about the sport. You aren't talking about their technique. You aren't asking if they give a shit if they won or lost. Like, just talk about something else in the car, right? And if you have a kid who really does want to win and is really competitive, then nurture that side of them. Like, figure out how to manage being the only kid who does want to win on a team with a bunch of kids who could care less about winning. I mean, that's a complicated conversation. So I think the parents need to take a little more responsibility, honestly, in approaching this youth sport thing with intention, because I think that's one of the ways kids are going to stay in sports longer if they're being correctly nurtured by their parents. But part of that is going to be, hey, we actually have to, not just once, but at like certain intervals in this journey, sit down and be like, what are we doing here? What does everybody want out of this? What's our investment? How's everybody doing? Let's do a check-in.
Okay, Molly and I recorded about the debrief last week, so timely.
I could literally see you bouncing there. It's like, I know Sasha wants to talk about debriefing.
Yeah, let's hear it. I want to know your perspective.
See your kid, right? You just so eloquently put together is see the person in front of you. I'm doing these community sport interviews right now, and the word love keeps coming up. And like, what is loving your kid? Loving your kid is seeing them for who they are. You already talked about holding them accountable. Holding them accountable is you made a commitment to this season to these teammates. And so if like to the point about a debrief, like, let's say, and I'm sure some of these conversations happened. So I also wanted to say about water polo, not only is water polo hard, like as you get older, it is like, it's aggressive and violent.
Oh no, people don't realize it's like a combat sport. Like
Yeah.
nobody really realizes it's basically martial arts. It's like fighting and swimming. Yeah. And it's one thing I will add just to pump it up is that there are very few, there's very few opportunities for women to play a full contact sport. And water polo is one of them. I mean, there are very few full contact sports. It's full contact.
So let's go back to your kid being 8 and water polo, right? And I'm sure, this is going to be hard. I'm sure some of the conversations that you had in the car weren't, why did you do that in the pool the first day? It's like, oh my gosh, tell me how that first one, tell me what you did at practice, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And also like, Kelly's the real master at this. I don't master this enough. Like Kelly's the master of literally picking up a kid and just being like, hey, what music should we listen to? Turning on the music, and then you just drive home. And again, let them lead, because we'll have days where, you can tell our kid, or she'll come in, now she drives herself, but she'll come in the house and she'll have days where you can see she just she doesn't feel emo, but has zero desire to talk about practice or water polo. And she just cruises into her room and she's in her own world. And then other days she walks in the door and she is like, oh my God, this and this and this and this and this and this. Right. And so we just want to be open to that. And rather than driving that, we're trying to let her drive that. Like, if she wants to talk about water polo and talk about water polo strategy and what she's working on, what she's doing, like if she wants to drive that, we're all in. We love sports. We could probably even contribute something tactical. But we try. It's hard. It's hard. to sometimes, and by the way, also parents like do need to give themselves a break. Like it is hard. I will say as a competitive athlete myself and as a sports parent, like I have failed. I have picked up my kid and said the wrong things for sure. Right. And everybody's going to do that. So I think we all have to give ourselves a little bit of grace that it's hard to, it's every parent has been on the pool deck and yelled something they didn't mean to yell out or whatever. We've all done that. But I think take it break again, just saying, okay, well, I probably shouldn't have done that. Next time I show up at the next game, I'm gonna be a more positive parent. So it's complicated. It's hard. It's a hard journey.
I actually had a
100%.
parent reach out to me today about this. And one of the things, just building upon that, is how do you have to say, hey, I don't have the bandwidth to do this right now, right? I want to talk to you about this, but maybe I don't have the bandwidth to do this. The ability to say, oh my gosh, I'm really sorry about what I just said there. I didn't tell you I didn't have the bandwidth. But
Yeah.
also having that, like Molly, Vanessa, our good friend Vanessa, right? That ability to have self-compassion to be like, I'm also a human. I'm not
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah. That was like one of the coolest. I don't remember who I learned this from. And my kids were already a little bit older, but it was this idea that like no parent is perfect. You're going to make lots of mistakes but that you can, that it's okay as long as you acknowledge it and you apologize. If you lose your temper or something happens and you do something that human beings do and you sort of own it, apologize. Like that's how it's not about being perfect all the time. It's about the ability to repair when you make mistakes. And certainly in the youth sports context, there's probably lots of opportunity for repair for parents because it is hard not to lose your mind. Like sometimes you're watching these games and you're like, as a competitive athlete, you're like losing your mind. You're like, swim or whatever. I mean, you just, you lose your mind a little bit. So you have to be able to repair that.
100%, 100%. Okay, now everyone's wondering, when is this book coming for parents?
Yeah, I mean, it's how books take a while. So I unfortunately don't think it will be until late 2026.
I mean, that's not
Just
actually as
based,
long as like
yeah,
a lot of projected timelines on stuff.
yeah,
So
yeah. So it's these things take a while. So yeah, we're working on it. We're really excited because we feel like there are a lot of books out there for parents on youth sports, but they're sort of like, okay, this one's on how to make sure your kid doesn't get an ACL tear. And they're all kind of all over. We're trying to make like a Bible, like it's like the what to expect when you're expecting of youth sports. Like you buy this book and you might have to reference it at different times, right? Like you might not, there might be chapters that where you're like, okay, my kid's 8, so I don't need to help my kid have a complicated conversation with their coach. But by the time they're 16, you might need to coach your kid on how to talk to their coach and like revisit the book. So hopefully we can do a good job with this because I think, parents it's hard. It's really hard to be a youth sports parent.
yes, I mean, I think if anyone can do it, I believe in you and Kelly for sure. Okay, so before we wrap up, our one rapid fire is, I mean, you've said so many great things. I feel like parents are furiously taking notes right now, but what's the one thing that you would want to leave parents and other caregivers with for, how they can best support their young athletes?
I mean, I think I already said this, but I'm just going to double click on it. Like create a wide opportunity for your kids to fall in love with movement because I think that is such a gift into their adulthood. We have such an adult health crisis and it one way to avoid that is to teach your kid or create an opportunity for your kid to fall in love with moving their body and start to learn how they feel mentally and physically when they do move and they feel better and realize they have more capacity and they can be kinder and nicer and work harder and be more creative when they've moved. And I think that is like one of the best gifts you can give to your kid as a parent.
Oh, I love it. Juliet, thank you so much. Where can everyone, follow you, read your book that is out, all of the
Someday it'll be
things?
out. Yeah. I am primarily at Juliet Starrett on Instagram. That's where I am sort of living for better or worse. And then our company is called The Ready State. So we are at The Ready State also on Instagram. And our website is thereadystate.com.
and fantastic book, Built to Move, fantastic podcast, the Ready State podcast. Everyone should be reading that book, listening to that podcast, all of the things. Juliet, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. So fun to talk to you both. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Strong Girl Talk podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, definitely head over to wherever you listen to podcasts and rate, review, and of course, subscribe so you never miss another episode. And head over to stronggirlpublishing.com to check out all of the books by Strong Girl Publishing's authors, including Molly Herford, Misha Powell, and so many more. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.